The signal. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the Stellar Envoy, Earth's first and only diplomatic vessel designed for interstellar contact. The ship's sleek, practical design reflected humanity's approach to this mission. No unnecessary flourishes, no intimidating weapon arrays, just pure function with careful consideration for the message it would send. Another transmission from the collective assembly. Captain Lieutenant Omar Rahman reported from his communication station. They're still requesting confirmation of our support fleet's position. A slight smile played across his face as he added, "This is the 7th time they've asked." Sarah understood their confusion. The collective assembly, a federation of 27 spacefaring species, had expected Earth to respond to their detection with an impressive fleet, as every other civilization had done before. Instead, humanity had chosen to send just one ship. The Stellar Envoy carried a crew of merely 48 specialists, each carefully selected not just for their expertise, but for their ability to think creatively under pressure. "Send them our standard response, Omar," Sarah instructed, turning away from the viewport. No support fleet exists. The Stellar Envoy represents Earth's full diplomatic presence. Dr. Maya Patel, the ship's xenoanthropologist, looked up from her data tablet. "Their confusion is fascinating, Captain. Based on the patterns in their communications, they seem unable to process our approach. It contradicts everything they understand about first contact protocols." "That's precisely why we chose this method," Sarah replied, settling into her command chair. "The Assembly's records that we intercepted showed every new species trying to outdo each other with bigger fleets and more impressive displays. We're sending a different message." The ship's AI projected a holographic display of their current position relative to collective space. "Captain, we're approaching the outer marker for their territory. Based on their previous interactions with new species, they typically deploy an escort fleet at this point." As if on cue, spatial distortions appeared ahead of the Stellar Envoy. 5 ships emerged, their designs varied and alien, representing different member species of the collective. Their formation suggested both welcome and wariness. "Incoming transmission," Omar announced. "They're requesting our fleet's coordinates again, but this time they're also offering navigational assistance for our support vessels they assume must be having technical difficulties." Sarah leaned forward in her chair, her expression determined. "Open a channel, Lieutenant." When Omar nodded, she spoke clearly and confidently. "Collective Assembly Escort Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Stellar Envoy. We appreciate your offer of assistance, but I assure you, we came alone because that's all we needed to send." The response was immediate chaos across multiple frequencies. Sarah could almost imagine the confusion aboard the escort vessels. Dr. Patel was frantically recording everything, her eyes bright with excitement at this unprecedented reaction. "They're asking if Earth is declaring war." Omar translated one of the more alarmed messages, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "No," Sarah responded, her voice calm and clear. "We're declaring peace. In our history, the most meaningful conversations have always started with 2 parties meeting as equals, without the need for displays of force or grandeur. We're here to talk, to learn, and to share. Nothing more, nothing less." The silence that followed was profound. The escort ships maintained their position, but their formation subtly shifted from cautionary to uncertain. Humanity's first official contact with the galactic community hung in that silence. Finally, a new voice came through, speaking in carefully translated Earth Standard. "Stellar Envoy, this is High Commissioner Zolix. Your approach is unprecedented. In 10,000 years of collective history, no species has ever." There was a pause, followed by what sounded like a mix between a laugh and a sigh. "Perhaps that is precisely why we should hear what you have to say. Please follow our escort to the diplomatic station." As the Stellar Envoy fell into formation with the escort ships, Sarah caught Dr. Patel grinning. "Something amusing, Doctor. Just thinking about how humans have always had a talent for rewriting the rules," Maya replied. They expected a fleet of ships, and we're going to show them why sometimes one ship, with the right people and the right approach, can change everything. Sarah nodded, watching the massive diplomatic station grow larger in their view. Humanity's first step into the galactic community would be remembered not for the size of their fleet or the impressiveness of their technology, but for the boldness of sending a single ship. It was time to show the collective assembly why Earth had chosen quality over quantity, wisdom over intimidation, and conversation over spectacle. The stellar envoy continued its approach, carrying not just 48 humans, but the hopes and principles of an entire planet. They were about to prove that sometimes the boldest statement is the simplest one. We come to talk, not to impress. Confusion in the council. The grand chamber of the collective assembly was in an uproar. Representatives of 27 spacefaring civilizations argued amongst themselves as holographic displays showed the single Earth vessel docked at their diplomatic station. First speaker Nixtera, her crystalline form shifting through shades of deep purple with agitation, called for order for the third time. "This is an insult," thundered Ambassador Krell of the militant hegemony, his armored exoskeleton clanking as he gestured at the displays. "They mock our protocols with this minimalist approach. One ship, 48 crew members. It must be a deception." The thought merger of the Epsilon Collective, a shimmering cloud of connected consciousness representing 6 billion minds, pulsed with curiosity. "We detect no deception in their transmissions. The humans appear to be exactly what they claim. A species that believes meaningful dialogue requires neither spectacle nor shows of force." First speaker Nixtera's crystalline surface caught the chamber's light as she turned to address the gathered representatives. "The human vessel, Stellar Envoy, has completed all our standard quarantine and security protocols. Their technology, while different from ours, shows remarkable efficiency in design. They appear to have developed their own solutions to faster-than-light travel, though their method is unlike any we've seen." "That's what concerns me," said Technical Overseer Vix, her multiple appendages manipulating streams of data in the air before her. "Their ship's design philosophy is elegant. They've achieved solutions we never considered, not because we couldn't, but because we never thought to approach the problems from their angle. It suggests a species that thinks fundamentally differently than any we've encountered." The chamber's attention shifted to Ambassador Genry of the Ancient Archives, one of the oldest members of the Assembly. Her ethereal form floated above her gravity platform as she spoke. "In all our recorded history, every species has approached first contact with the same basic assumption, that they must demonstrate their civilization's worth through displays of technological advancement, military might, or cultural achievements. These humans—" She paused, her form flickering thoughtfully. "These humans seem to operate on a completely different premise." "A dangerous premise," Krell interjected. "How can we assess their capabilities if they refuse to demonstrate them?" "Perhaps," the thought merger pulsed, "that is precisely their point. They challenge our assumption that capabilities must be demonstrated to be valued." The chamber fell silent as the main display shifted to a live feed from the diplomatic station. The human delegation, led by Captain Sarah Chen, was preparing for their first formal meeting with the Assembly's diplomatic court. The humans had declined the traditional ceremonial robes, choosing instead to wear their standard uniforms, simple, functional, yet dignified. "Look at how they move," observed cultural analyst Mira, her sensory tendrils waving gently. "Each member of their crew serves multiple functions. Their captain isn't just a leader. She's actively involved in diplomatic discussions. Their scientists double as cultural advisors. Their engineers understand xenobiology. They've sent us not just specialists, but adaptable problem solvers." First speaker Nixtera raised her crystalline form to its full height. "The question before us is not whether their approach is unprecedented. It clearly is. The question is whether we can adapt our own thinking enough to engage with a species that challenges our most basic assumptions about interstellar relations." They're requesting permission to present their case directly to the full assembly, announced Communications Director Pell. Another deviation from protocol. New species typically spend months in preliminary discussions before addressing the full chamber. The thought merger pulsed with what might have been amusement. They continue to surprise us. Every protocol we've established over millennia, they question not through defiance, but through simple, reasonable alternatives. Ambassador Genry floated forward. I have accessed records from their ship's database, which they provided freely. Another surprise. Their history is filled with instances where small groups, even individuals, changed the course of their civilization. They believe in the power of meaningful dialogue over displays of force. Perhaps, her form shimmered thoughtfully, perhaps we should listen not despite their differences, but because of them. First speaker Nixtera surveyed the chamber, noting how the initial outrage had transformed into a complex mix of curiosity, concern, and cautious interest. We face an unprecedented situation. The humans have challenged our assumptions not through confrontation, but through their simple refusal to accept that things must be done as they have always been done. She turned to address the full assembly. I propose we grant their request to address this chamber. Let us show them that we too can adapt, that we too can consider new approaches. After all, isn't that what the collective assembly was founded for? To learn from each other, to grow beyond our individual perspectives. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous. It never was in the assembly. But the majority agreed. As the chamber prepared to receive the human delegation, first speaker Nixtera couldn't help but wonder if this small crew from Earth, with their single ship and their revolutionary approach to diplomacy, was about to change not just protocols, but the very foundation of how the galaxy's civilizations interacted with each other. The humans had come to talk. Perhaps it was time for the collective assembly to listen. The human way. The diplomatic station's emergency alarms blared just as Captain Sarah Chen was preparing to address the collective assembly. Red warning lights pulsed through the station's crystalline corridors as panicked voices echoed in multiple languages through the communication systems. Status report, Sarah demanded, tapping her comlink to the stellar envoy. Lieutenant Raman's voice came through clearly. Multiple ships incoming, Captain. They're not responding to hails. The station's sensors identify them as the Nexer, a species that was denied membership in the collective due to their aggressive expansion policies. Dr. Maya Patel quickly pulled up data on her tablet. The Nexer, silicon-based life forms. They've attempted to force their way into the collective 3 times in the past century. Each time, they were repelled by the combined assembly fleet, which is currently deployed to the outer sectors. First speaker Nixtera added, her crystalline form pulsing with worry. We're operating on minimal defensive capabilities. Our diplomatic station was never meant to withstand a direct assault. Sarah watched as the station's holographic displays showed 9 Nexer vessels approaching in attack formation. The station's shields were already starting to flicker under their initial bombardment. Around them, assembly representatives argued about evacuation procedures and emergency protocols. How long until your defensive fleet returns? Sarah asked Nixtera. 4 hours at minimum, the first speaker replied. We may not have 4 minutes. Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through possibilities. Lieutenant Raman, prep the envoy for immediate launch. Dr. Patel, I need everything you have on Nexer psychology and social structures. Technical overseer Vix. She turned to the multiple-limbed alien who had been skeptical of humans earlier. I need access to your station's communication arrays. You're not thinking of engaging 9 warships with your single vessel? Ambassador Krell asked incredulously. No, Sarah smiled. I'm thinking of ending this conflict before it becomes a battle. The human way. Within minutes, the stellar envoy had undocked from the station. But instead of retreating or attempting to fight, it took up position directly between the station and the incoming Nexer fleet. Sarah stood on her bridge, wearing not battle armor, but her standard uniform. Open a channel to the Nexer fleet, she ordered. All frequencies, all languages, including their silicon-based communication patterns that Dr. Patel identified. The response was immediate. A harsh, crystalline voice filled with contempt. "Remove your vessel or be destroyed with the station. This is not your conflict." "I am Captain Sarah Chen of Earth, and I disagree," Sarah replied calmly. "You see, we humans have a saying. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. By threatening this diplomatic station, you've made this our conflict." She nodded to Dr. Patel, who had patched into the station's powerful communication array. The xenanthropologist began broadcasting data, not weapons specifications or shield frequencies, but cultural information, art, music, poetry. The collected stories of Earth's history of conflict resolution and peaceful cooperation. "We know why you're here," Sarah continued. "You believe the only way to gain respect is through force. That's why you keep attacking, why you think you need to prove your worth through conquest. But we humans came here with one ship, no weapons array, and a crew of 48. And you know what? The Assembly listened to us. Not because we were powerful, but because we were different." The Nexer ships had stopped firing, though they maintained their attack position. Sarah pressed her advantage. "Your species creates beautiful crystalline structures that can house entire data networks. You process information in ways organic beings can only dream of. You could revolutionize data storage and processing for the entire collective. But instead, you're trying to prove your worth through destruction." "Pretty words," the Nexer commander responded, but there was uncertainty in their tone. "Words do not change reality." "Actually," Sarah smiled, "in human history, words have changed reality countless times. But if you need more than words," she nodded to her crew. The Stellar Envoy's main computer began transmitting a complex series of codes, not attack algorithms, but a new programming language the human crew had developed specifically for silicon-based intelligence. A language that bridged the gap between organic and silicon thought patterns. "This is our gift to you," Sarah explained, "a way to communicate your ideas, your art, your potential to organic species in ways they can truly understand. We developed it just for this meeting, hoping we might encounter silicon-based life forms. We came prepared not for war, but for understanding." The Nexer ship's aggressive formation began to waver as they processed the new language, discovering ways to express concepts they had never been able to convey to organic species before. "You created this, for us." The Nexer commander's tone had completely changed, even though we were attacking. "Especially because you were attacking," Sarah replied. "Because we believed you were fighting not out of hatred, but out of frustration. The frustration of not being understood." The Nexer fleet's formation dissolved entirely as they began using the new language to communicate with each other and the station in ways they never could before. Their weapon systems powered down. First Speaker Nixtera's voice came through the comm, filled with amazement. "You turned a battle into a cultural exchange, without firing a single shot." "The human way," Sarah replied simply. "Sometimes the best defense isn't a powerful weapon or an intimidating fleet. Sometimes it's just understanding what the other side really needs and being prepared to offer it." As the crisis dissolved into an impromptu first contact session between the collective and the Nexar, with the human crew helping to facilitate communication, Sarah caught Dr. Patel grinning at her data readings. "Something amusing, Doctor." "Just thinking," Maya replied, "that we didn't just prove why one ship was enough. We proved why it was better than a fleet. A fleet would have started a war. One ship with the right approach just made peace." Sarah looked out at the Nexer ships, now arranged in a conversational pattern around the station rather than an attack formation. Sometimes, she reflected, the boldest choice isn't how many ships you send, but what you choose to do with the one you have. Breaking protocol. The days following the Nexer incident transformed the diplomatic station into something it had never been before, a place of genuine cultural exchange rather than formal procedure. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck as Nexar crystalline data structures interfaced with organic computing systems, creating new hybrid technologies that neither side had imagined possible before. "The Assembly's Technology Council is having fits," Dr. Maya Patel remarked, joining her captain at the viewport. "Apparently, we violated 16 different protocols about technology sharing in the past week alone. The fact that these violations are producing unprecedented breakthroughs isn't helping their anxiety." Sarah smiled. "And how many protocols did we break by letting the Nexar engineers directly collaborate with assembly specialists without going through the standard year-long approval process?" 23, Maya replied cheerfully. "Though Ambassador Krell insists it's 24 if you count the informal lunch meetings." The mention of lunch meetings made Sarah chuckle. The human crew's habit of discussing serious matters over shared meals had scandalized the more formal assembly members at first. Now, however, even the rigid Krell had been spotted engaging in what humans would call water cooler conversation with various species. Lieutenant Raman's voice came through the comm system. "Captain, you might want to come to the main conference room. We've got a situation developing." Sarah and Maya found the conference room in chaos, or at least what passed for chaos in diplomatic circles. Representatives from 12 species were arguing over a holographic display of a newly discovered spatial anomaly near the collective's borders. "It's clearly a natural phenomenon," insisted Technical Overseer Vix, her appendages manipulating data streams frantically. "Which does nothing to explain the pattern of its movements," countered a Nexar scientist, their crystalline form flickering with frustration. "Natural phenomena don't change direction to avoid populated systems." The thought merger of the Epsilon Collective pulsed with concern. "Our predictive models show a 73.4% chance of catastrophic damage if the anomaly reaches any inhabited world." "What's the situation?" Sarah asked, stepping into the room. First speaker Nixtera's crystalline form shifted to acknowledge her presence. "A spatial anomaly of unknown origin is moving through collective space. Our standard procedures call for observation and data collection from a safe distance. But it'll reach the Centauri colony world in 6 days if we do nothing," finished Ambassador Krell. For once, his usual antagonism toward human approaches was absent. "We have evacuation protocols, but moving 50 million colonists in 6 days is impossible." Sarah studied the holographic display, noting how the anomaly's path seemed to weave between star systems. "It's not random," she muttered. "Maya, what do you see?" Dr. Patel was already running analyses on her tablet. "The movement pattern. It reminds me of ancient sea navigation routes on Earth. Ships would follow specific paths to avoid dangerous waters while maintaining efficient travel times." "A ship?" several voices asked simultaneously. "Or something like one," Sarah suggested. "Lieutenant Raman, can you overlay the known positions of major gravity wells and energy fields in this sector?" When Omar added the data, the pattern became clear. The anomaly wasn't just avoiding populated systems. It was navigating the safest route through a complex network of spatial disturbances. "It's a vessel," Sarah announced, "or at least something piloted, and it's trying to avoid contact." "Impossible," Vix declared. "Our scans show no conventional structure or energy signatures." "Conventional being the key word," Maya pointed out. "We're looking for what we expect to see, not what's actually there." Sarah turned to address the gathered representatives. "I have a proposal, but it violates at least 30 protocols." "Only 30?" Krell muttered, though there was a hint of amusement in his tone. "We take the stellar envoy out to meet it," Sarah continued. "Not to study it, not to scan it, but to make contact. If it's intelligent enough to navigate, it's intelligent enough to communicate." "Absolutely not," Vix protested. "The regulations for approaching unknown phenomena. We'll get 50 million people killed if we follow them." Sarah interrupted. "Sometimes new situations require new approaches." The room fell silent as first speaker Nixtera raised her crystalline form. 6 days ago, I would have rejected such a proposal immediately. But 6 days ago, I watched a single human ship prevent a war by offering understanding instead of resistance. She turned to Sarah. What do you need? Just my ship and crew, Sarah replied. And maybe a few volunteers from the assembly who are willing to think differently. To everyone's surprise, Ambassador Krell was the first to step forward. The militant hegemony volunteers. Perhaps it's time we learn to fight problems with something other than weapons. The Nexer scientists joined him. Our experience with human communication protocols might be valuable. One by one, representatives offered their support, each bringing unique perspectives and abilities to the mission. The human approach of direct engagement, of breaking protocols when necessary to save lives, was spreading through the collective like a benevolent virus. As they prepared for the mission, Maya found Sarah in her ready room. You know what's really revolutionary about all this? The xenanthropologist asked. What's that? We're not just breaking their protocols. We're teaching them why sometimes protocols need to be broken. The collective is learning to adapt, to think creatively, to value innovation over tradition when lives are at stake. Sarah nodded, reviewing the mission plans. And we're learning too. Their caution, their experience, their diverse perspectives, all of it makes us stronger. We're not just changing them, they're changing us. The Stellar Envoy prepared for launch, its crew now a mix of humans and volunteers from various species. They were about to break more protocols, challenge more assumptions, and possibly make first contact with an entirely new form of life. And they were going to do it the human way, with open minds, ready to learn as much as teach. As Sarah took her place on the bridge, she reflected that this was exactly why Earth had sent just one ship. Not because they couldn't send more, but because one ship was enough to show the galaxy a new way of thinking, one broken protocol at a time, a new understanding. The Stellar Envoy hung in space at the edge of sensor range from the anomaly, its mixed crew of humans and collective volunteers watching as the mysterious phenomenon continued its careful navigation through the sector. The ship's enhanced sensors, augmented by Nexer crystalline processing arrays and assembly quantum detection systems, painted a clearer picture than any single species technology could have achieved alone. Energy patterns are shifting, reported the Nexer science officer, their crystalline form pulsing with excitement. It's responding to our presence, but not in any way our standard protocols predicted. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the center of her bridge, now a fascinating blend of human and alien technologies. That's because we're not following standard protocols. We're not here to study it or avoid it. We're here to say hello. The anomaly's course is adjusting, Lieutenant Raman announced. It's moving to parallel our position, maintaining exact distance. Dr. Maya Patil looked up from her comprehensive sensor readings. It's mimicking us. Not just our position, but our energy output, our communication patterns. It's learning. Then let's give it something interesting to learn, Sarah decided. She turned to Ambassador Krell, who had insisted on joining the mission. Ambassador, you once said we couldn't assess capabilities without demonstration. Care to help us demonstrate something unique? The formerly rigid diplomat's armored exoskeleton shifted in what had become his version of a laugh. Captain, I believe I'm beginning to understand the human way of thinking. You want to show it who we are, not what we can do. Sarah nodded. Lieutenant Raman, begin broadcasting on all frequencies, but not our standard greetings or mathematical sequences. Send music, Earth's symphonies, Nexer crystalline harmonies, hegemony war chants, assembly quantum choruses. Let's show it the full spectrum of who we are. The response was immediate and stunning. The anomaly's energy patterns began to shift and flow, creating visual and auditory patterns that somehow combined all the musical styles they had transmitted into something entirely new. It wasn't just mimicking anymore. It was composing, creating, communicating. It's beautiful, breathed first speaker Nix Tara, who had also joined the mission despite traditional protocols, requiring her to remain at the diplomatic station. Her crystalline form resonated with the alien harmony. The thought merger representative pulsed with revelation. It's not a ship at all. It's a thought. A consciousness operating on a level we never considered possible. It didn't avoid populated systems out of fear or hostility. It was trying not to disrupt the patterns of our existence with its presence. And now? Sarah asked, watching as the anomaly's patterns grew more complex, more engaging. Now it knows we want to listen. Maya answered, her eyes shining with understanding. We didn't try to classify it, study it, or defend against it. We simply reached out in friendship. The next few hours transformed everything the collective thought they knew about first contact protocols. The entity, which communicated through patterns of energy and thought, shared concepts that defied traditional translation. It showed them perspectives on space, time, and consciousness that challenged the foundations of their scientific understanding. But more importantly, it responded to their openness with its own. Through the combined efforts of human intuition, Nexer data processing, assembly quantum mathematics, and the contributions of every species present, they established a true dialogue with a life form that existed beyond their normal concepts of existence. You know what this means, Maya said quietly to Sarah as they watched the ongoing exchange. Every protocol for first contact in the collective's archives just became obsolete. Good, Sarah replied. Because those protocols were based on fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of showing weakness, fear of being unprepared. We showed them a better way. Ambassador Krell, overhearing, moved to join their conversation. You showed us that true strength lies not in impressive fleets or advanced technology, but in the willingness to reach out, to be vulnerable, to learn and adapt. His armored form straightened proudly. The militant hegemony will be proposing a complete revision of first contact protocols to the Assembly. The entire collective will need to change. First Speaker Nyx Terra added, her crystalline form glowing with purpose. This encounter has proven that our rigid structures and assumptions limit us more than they protect us. The entity's energy patterns shifted again, forming what the human crew immediately recognized as a gesture of farewell. As it prepared to depart, it left them with one final gift, a method of communication that would allow species across the galaxy to share not just words or data, but genuine understanding. It's not leaving because it has to, the thought merger observed. It's leaving because it knows we need to grow on our own, to find our own path forward with these new insights. As the stellar envoy prepared to return to the diplomatic station, Sarah gathered her diverse crew, human and alien alike, on the bridge. When Earth decided to send just one ship to meet the galaxy, many thought we were being reckless or arrogant. But we believe that true diplomacy isn't about showing strength or following protocols. It's about showing who you really are and being open to who others might be. First Speaker Nyx Terra's crystalline form pulsed with emotional resonance. One ship was enough because you didn't come to impress us with your power. You came to show us a new way of thinking, of exploring, of growing. And in doing so, you've changed the course of galactic civilization. The stellar envoy's journey back to the diplomatic station was different from its first arrival. The single Earth vessel was no longer viewed as an anomaly or a diplomatic faux pas. It had become a symbol of a new era in interstellar relations, one where understanding mattered more than impressive displays, where courage meant being willing to reach out rather than show force, and where one ship with the right approach could indeed change everything. As they docked at the station, messages were already flowing across the galaxy through the new communication method gifted by the entity. Species that had struggled to understand each other for centuries were suddenly sharing thoughts, feelings, and perspectives in ways they never imagined possible. The rigid hierarchies and protocols of the past were giving way to something new, something more dynamic and inclusive. You humans have an interesting saying, Ambassador Krell remarked as they disembarked. Something about small ripples creating large waves. Sarah smiled. Small ripples can create big changes, she corrected gently. Though in this case, I'd say we created quite a splash. The galaxy would never be the same. And it all started because humanity had the audacity to believe that sometimes One ship is all you need, if you're brave enough to use it wisely.